It began with a soft sound, barely audible above the wind. Tap, tap, tap. Every night at exactly 9:42 p.m., the same faint knocking echoed through the living room window. At first, they thought it was the branches swaying, or maybe just their imagination. But they were wrong. What they would uncover would not only change their lives, it would expose a truth buried in silence for over a decade. The Grant family had moved into the small town of Miller's Hollow just 6 weeks prior. Nestled at the edge of the woods, the house was quaint, old-fashioned, and carried the soft scent of pine wood and forgotten memories. Emily Grant, a 35-year-old art teacher, had fallen in love with the place instantly. Her husband, Mark, a freelance web developer, appreciated the tranquility. Their 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, had declared it a fairy tale house, especially because her bedroom window looked out onto the sprawling forest. Life in Miller's Hollow was peaceful until the third Friday of October. It was a quiet night, the kind where you hear the crackling of the fireplace more than your own thoughts. Mark was buried in his laptop, coding. Emily was painting in her small studio off the kitchen. Sophie was asleep, clutching her stuffed fox under a pile of blankets. And then, tap, tap, tap. Mark looked up. The sound came from the living room. Window, just 3 light knocks. Nothing more. He rose from the couch and peeked through the glass. Nothing. Just the reflection of his own face and the porch light flickering slightly. He shrugged it off. Probably the wind, he muttered, and returned to his work. The next night, it happened again. 42 p.m., tap, tap, tap. Emily heard it this time. She paused mid-stroke on her canvas and walked into the living room, her brush still in hand. Mark joined her, both of them now curious. They opened the door and stepped outside. Again, nothing. But this time, Emily spotted something. Just beneath the window, a paw print. Tiny, delicate, unmistakably feline. The couple exchanged a look. A cat? Mark guessed. Emily nodded. Seems like it. They dismissed it as a one-time visit from a local stray, but then it happened again, and again, and again. Each night at the exact same time, the knocking returned. Mark set up his phone to record video one evening, just to be sure. The footage was grainy, but there it was, clear as day. A small gray and white cat, standing on its hind legs, gently tapping on the glass with one paw. They were stunned. Sophie, upon seeing the video, squealed with delight. "It's like a storybook kitty. Can we keep her?" Emily smiled, but something about the cat's eyes unsettled her. They weren't wild. They weren't begging for food. They looked pleading. The family debated bringing the cat inside. Emily, ever the animal lover, wanted to offer shelter. Mark was hesitant. "We don't know where she's from. She might have an owner, or fleas, or worse." Still, Emily left out a blanket and some food on the porch. But oddly, the food was always untouched. Only the blanket seemed disturbed, as though the cat had curled up for warmth and left before dawn. Emily started sketching the cat, those haunting, intelligent eyes. Her canvas filled with variations of its face, its paws, the curve of its tail. Sophie named her Whisper, but every night Whisper would only knock, never meow, never scratch. Just those 3 gentle taps, as if asking for permission, as if she was waiting. One chilly evening, Emily stepped out with a flashlight, determined to follow the cat after her nightly visit. She stood quietly in the shadow of the porch, camera ready. 42. The sound came. Whisper emerged from the edge of the woods. Graceful, deliberate. She approached the window, stood tall, and tapped once, twice, 3 times. Then she turned and slowly walked back toward the trees. Emily followed, flashlight dimmed, her breath shallow. The cat weaved between tall grass and fallen logs, never rushing, as if she knew the path perfectly. But just as Emily reached the edge of a clearing, Whisper vanished. No rustling, no scurry, just gone. Emily scanned the area, only to find something else. An old wooden sign, broken and half buried under moss. She brushed away the dirt and read the faded letters. Camp Hollow Ridge, closed since 1998. Chill ran up her spine. That was nearly 3 decades ago. She turned to leave, only to realize Whisper was now sitting directly behind her, silent as the wind, eyes locked on her soul. The next day, Emily's curiosity piqued. She dug into the history of their home and the now-defunct camp nearby. Most records were mundane, property deeds, forestry reports. But then she stumbled upon something in their own attic, an old leather-bound journal wedged behind a beam. Inside were the scribbles of a teenage girl named Anna. The entries were dated 1996-1998. The final page, marked July 4th, 1998, read, "I think she knows. Whisper watches every night. I tried to tell the others, but they laughed. But I saw what happened. I saw her fall. And now, she wants me to remember, but I don't want to. I don't want to." Emily's hands trembled. She reread it twice, then a third time. Could it be a coincidence? A cat named Whisper in the woods, tied to a girl who lived or visited the same area, and what had she meant by, "I saw her fall"? Determined to dig deeper, Emily and Mark visited the Miller's Hollow Historical Society. An elderly woman named Gloria helped them. When asked about Camp Hollow Ridge, Gloria's demeanor changed. "That place," she whispered, "was cursed by grief." She showed them a photo from 1998, Camp Hollow Ridge, summer session. Dozens of kids smiling in front of the lodge, and in the front row, a girl holding a gray and white cat, Anna. But Emily noticed something odd. The shadows behind the group didn't quite match the trees. One looked vaguely human-shaped. Out of place. Looming, she pointed it out. Gloria nodded grimly. "That's why they closed the camp. An accident. A girl fell from the cliff behind the lodge, but some say Anna didn't just witness it." "What do you mean?" Emily asked. "I mean, she might have caused it." Back home, the atmosphere changed. Whisper knocked again that night. But this time, when Emily approached the window, the cat didn't look at her. She looked past her, into the house. Emily turned. There was nothing there. But that same night, Mark noticed scratches along the window frame. On the inside, deep, thin claw marks. "Are you sure she's knocking from the outside?" Mark asked, half joking, but Emily didn't laugh. The family began hearing noises in the walls, whispers that weren't quite there. Sophie began sleepwalking, always toward the window, always at 9:42, and always whispering one word, "Anna," Mark. Finally decided to set up a full surveillance system. Motion-triggered cameras, mics, even night vision. And that's when things escalated. Footage revealed Whisper, appearing not just at the front window, but circling the house. She tapped on every window 3 times, then moved on, like she was searching. And then, one morning, Emily found it. A name etched into the condensation on the bathroom mirror. Anna. She hadn't showered yet. No one had been in the bathroom. That same morning, Whisper didn't come. For the first time. In 19 nights, the house was quiet at 9:42. Too quiet. That evening, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder cracked through the sky. At exactly 9:42 p.m., a different sound came. Not a knock, but a scream. From the woods, Emily burst onto the porch, flashlight raised. And there, drenched and crying, was Sophie. She'd walked out during her sleep again. And behind her, just barely visible in the flash of lightning, Whisper. She wasn't walking away this time. She was staring straight at Emily. Her eyes glowed. And then the lightning struck the tree nearest the porch, snapping it in half. Emily scooped up her daughter, ran inside, and locked the door, but not before seeing it. A shadow standing behind Whisper, too tall to be human, and gone the moment she blinked. Emily spent the next day combing over the journal, the photographs, the footage, and then she saw it. In the background of the old photo, directly behind Anna, barely visible in the trees, a second girl, face down, motionless, and Whisper sitting beside her. It wasn't a coincidence. The cat wasn't just visiting, she was leading them to something or someone, and Emily finally realized Whisper didn't come for food or warmth or company. She came for the truth. The storm had passed, but the air hung heavy with tension. Emily stood by the living room window, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes locked on the spot where Whisper had last stood. The flash of lightning from the night before played over and over in her mind. The cat, the shadow behind her, Sophie outside alone in the dark. The question gnawed at her. Why now? Why them? Sophie, curled on the couch, was quiet that morning. Too quiet. She hadn't mentioned the sleepwalking, the scream, or the storm. "Do you remember anything from last night?" Emily asked gently. Sophie shook her head, then after a pause murmured, "She was calling me." Emily's breath caught. "Who was, sweetheart?" Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "The girl in the woods." Emily didn't wait. By noon, she had packed a backpack with a flashlight, gloves, a thermos of coffee, a notebook, and her camera. She kissed Mark and Sophie goodbye and told them she was going to check out the old camp, alone. "I don't like it," Mark said. "That place, it's not right." "I have to," Emily replied. "I think there's something there." Something Whisper wants us to find. The trail leading from their backyard into the forest had become familiar. The trees swayed gently, and the sunlight filtered through the canopy in speckled beams. It would have been peaceful, if not for the silence. The deeper Emily went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of leaves beneath her boots. She passed the moss-covered sign for Camp Hollow Ridge and moved deeper into the overgrowth. After 20 minutes of hiking, the remains of the camp emerged like the skeleton of a forgotten world. The lodge was still standing, barely. Windows shattered. Roof collapsed on one side. Wooden cabins surrounding it looked more like gravestones than shelters. And everywhere, vines, as if the forest was trying to reclaim what had been taken. Emily took a photo, then another, and then she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. She turned. Whisper stood on the broken porch of one of the cabins, paw lifted. Knocking on the door, Emily cautiously approached the cabin. Whisper remained still, watching her. The door was swollen shut, warped by years of rain and rot. She tried the handle. It didn't budge. She pushed harder, shoulder to the wood, until finally the door gave way with a loud crack, spilling leaves and dust into the air. The smell hit her first. Old mold, wood rot, and something faintly metallic. Inside, the cabin was dark. She turned on her flashlight. The beam caught something on the far wall, a message carved into the wood. She fell. I tried to help. Emily's skin prickled. The letters were deep, etched in desperation. She turned and caught a glimpse of something beneath the bunk bed. An old box inside it. A stack of letters folded carefully, bound in a ribbon long since faded pink. Each one signed Anna. She took one out and read, July 1st, 1998. I don't know what to do. I told them she slipped, but it's not true. I didn't push her. I didn't. But I watched. I froze, and now she's gone. Emily placed a hand on her chest. The truth was unraveling fast, and it was darker than she'd imagined. Whisper darted suddenly toward the edge of the clearing, her body low and tail flicking. Emily followed as the cat led her to a thicket near a crumbling stone well. Whisper stopped and began pawing at the ground. Emily got down and brushed the dirt aside. There was something buried, something wooden. It took 20 minutes of digging with her hands before she uncovered what appeared to be a small box. Inside was a cracked locket with 2 photographs, one of Anna and one of a girl Emily didn't recognize, and beneath that, bones, tiny, fragile, animal bones, and a child's sandal. Emily recoiled. Had this place been a burial site? She took a photo of everything, carefully repacked it, and stood in stunned silence. Whisper sat beside the hole, her eyes on the forest beyond. Watching, waiting. Then, out of nowhere, a child's laughter, high, distant, and wrong. Emily turned sharply. There was no one there. Back at home, Emily showed Mark the letters and photos. His expression shifted from confusion to horror. "We need to talk to someone," he said. This is way beyond creepy. It's criminal." They visited the sheriff's office the next day. Officer Dana Mitchell, an aging but sharp woman, listened carefully as they explained what they'd found. She frowned. "You said the name was Anna?" Emily nodded. Mitchell walked to a file cabinet, pulled out a thin, dusty folder, and laid it on the desk. Inside, a missing person report from 1998. The victim, Emily Parker, age 10, went missing from Camp Hollow Ridge on July 4th. Last seen with her best friend, Anna Reynolds. "I remember this case," Mitchell said. "She was never found. The camp shut down a week later. The parents sued, but it went nowhere." She tapped the folder. "And Anna, she moved out of town with her family that same month. They didn't want to talk to anyone. No one's seen them since." Emily sat frozen. The girl in the locket, the letters, the knocking, the sleepwalking. It was all connected. But why was Whisper still here? That night, as Emily lay in bed, she felt a cold presence. She opened her eyes and saw Sophie standing at the foot of the bed, her eyes wide open, arms hanging limp. "Sophie," Emily whispered. "She's in the window," Sophie said, her voice flat. Emily jumped up and rushed to the living room. The curtains fluttered gently, and standing outside, half hidden by the darkness, was a little girl. Pale, her eyes hollow, hair matted and wet, and behind her, Whisper unmoving, her gaze fixed on Emily. Emily opened the door, heart pounding. The girl was gone. Whisper walked slowly inside the house. For the first time, she sat in the center of, the living room, and looked at the hallway toward Sophie's room, and then she meowed. Just once, low, grieving. Emily understood then. The cat wasn't just a messenger, she was a guardian. The next day, Mark did a deeper dive into local newspaper archives. He found a single line in a 1999 article, buried in the legal section. Anna Reynolds, 14, committed to St. Agnes Psychiatric Hospital after reported hallucinations and trauma related to a childhood tragedy. St. Agnes had since been closed. Emily sat at the kitchen table reading the last of Anna's letters. Most were written as confessions. Some begged for forgiveness, but the last one, "If anyone finds this, please forgive me. She never left me. I see her in every shadow. She won't leave. Not until someone listens. Not until the truth is known." It was signed with a single word: Whisper. That evening, Sophie drew a picture with her crayons. Emily didn't think much of it until she saw what it was. A house. Their house. And in the window, a cat. And a little girl. In the sky, instead of a sun, was a spiral of black crayon, swirling and swallowing the light. "Sophie, what's this?" "That's when the girl leaves," she said matter-of-factly. "When the black comes," Emily tried, to hide her alarm. "What black?" "The black thing in the woods. She said it's where she fell." Emily and Mark made a decision. They would go back to the camp one last time, this time as a family. Not to explore, not to document, but to bring closure. Emily believed the spot where the sandal and bones were found might hold more, maybe even remains. Maybe the spirit would finally be free if someone acknowledged the truth. They packed tools, maps, food, and camping gear. They planned to leave the next morning, but that night, at 9:42 p.m., something new happened. A knock. But not from outside. It came from the attic. Tap, tap, tap. Mark climbed the ladder. Inside, scratched into the wall in childlike handwriting. "Don't. Go alone. He's still there." The attic message lingered in their minds like smoke. Don't go alone. He's still there. Who was he? What did it mean? Emily couldn't shake the dread curling in her stomach. But by morning, her resolve had solidified. She wouldn't be afraid anymore. Mark tried to talk her out of it. "We've already found so much. Maybe it's time to report it all and let the authorities handle the rest." But Emily shook her head. "No one's going to do anything. They haven't for over 20 years. The only reason we've even come this far is because of Whisper. She led us. She chose us." Sophie, dressed in her yellow hoodie and holding her favorite stuffed bunny, quietly asked, "Are we going to help the sad girl?" Emily knelt and took her hand. "Yes, sweetie. We're going to try." They loaded up the SUV. Food, water, sleeping. Bags, rope, walkie-talkies, a first aid kit, and Emily's camera and notebook. As a final touch, Emily took the box of Anna's letters and slipped them into her backpack. Whisper jumped silently into the back seat, curling up as though she had done it 1,000 times. They were ready. The road to Camp Hollow Ridge was barely navigable. Twisting dirt paths choked with overgrowth, roots clawing at the tires, sunlight struggling through the branches overhead. Mark drove in tense silence while Emily studied the letters again, trying to match events and dates. She wrote, "This one the day after Emily Parker went missing," she said. "Anna said she heard her crying from the well, but no one believed her." Sophie looked up from her seat. "That's where she is, the well." Emily and Mark exchanged a glance. "How do you know that, sweetheart?" Emily asked. Sophie shrugged. "She told me in the dream. She's scared. She says it's cold down there." Whisper stood on the back seat, alert now. Her tail stiffened. That same unnatural silence had returned. No birds, no wind, only the crunch of gravel and the low rumble of the engine. They arrived at the edge of the camp around noon. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the SUV doors opened. Camp Hollow Ridge stood just as Emily had left it. But this time, she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The old well looked even more ominous in the light of day. Moss covered the stone, and vines crept up its walls like fingers trying to hold something in. Sophie stood a few feet away, her expression grave. "She's still down there." Emily peered into the darkness. "We need to know for sure." Mark grabbed a rope from the supplies and tied it to a nearby tree. "I'll go," he said. "If there's a chance, we have to know." He slowly lowered himself down into the well, the rope creaking with every foot. Emily held her breath, listening to the soft echoes as Mark's voice disappeared into the depths. 10 feet. 15. 20. Then silence. "Mark?" Emily called. Nothing. Then, a shout from below. "There's something here!" A pause. "Emily, I think they're bones." Mark surfaced, white-faced, clutching a handful of items wrapped in an old, rotted blanket, a child's locket, a broken shoe, and a small, rusted bracelet with the name Emily etched on it. There was no doubt anymore. Emily Parker had never left the camp. Whisper rubbed her body against the bundle, then sat back and let out the most mournful sound Emily had ever heard, a deep, guttural yowl that echoed through the trees. Sophie backed away slowly. "She's scared again. She says he is angry." Mark stiffened. "Who's he, Sophie?" Sophie looked behind them. There. Emily turned and froze. A man stood at the edge of the woods, pale, lanky, with hollow eyes and a crooked jaw. His clothes were tattered, face marked with deep scratches and grime. Then he vanished. Back at their makeshift campsite near the main lodge, Emily recounted what Sophie had said. I think the girl, Emily Parker, wasn't alone when she fell. Someone might have seen it, maybe even caused it. Mark nodded grimly. I've been thinking, if Anna didn't push her, who did? Sophie was drawing again, this time a cabin, a girl falling, and a tall figure watching from the trees. I think she's trying to show us, Emily whispered. That night, they stayed in the old lodge. They lit a fire in the decrepit fireplace, rolled out sleeping bags, and tried to rest. But rest wouldn't come. At 1:37 a.m., they heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, dragging. Emily grabbed the flashlight and tiptoed to the window. A shadow stood by. The well. Watching. Then it turned and slowly walked into the woods. Whisper hissed. The next morning, while cleaning up the main cabin, Emily found a false panel in the wall. Inside, hidden in a plastic bag, was a final letter. I can't sleep anymore. I see him everywhere. He was the groundskeeper. He always watched us. He said Emily slipped, but I know he lied. I saw him push her when she tried to run. I was too scared to stop him. Now he won't let her leave. She cries in the well, but no one hears except me. Emily sat back, stunned. The man in the woods, the scratching, the knocking. Whisper hadn't been warning them about the girl. She had been warning them about him. That afternoon, Emily, Mark, and Sophie retraced the girl's steps. They followed Whisper as she led them through a dense path behind the cabins, to a smaller, forgotten building, half collapsed and overrun with roots. Inside were rusted tools, broken lanterns, and faded photographs of children pinned to the walls. This was his place, Mark murmured. Emily picked up a cracked nameplate. Walter Griggs, maintenance. Sophie clung to her mother's side. He's mad. He says we shouldn't have come. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind them. The light flickered out, and a voice, cold, raspy, whispered, She was mine. Emily grabbed Sophie and shoved the door with her shoulder. It wouldn't budge. Mark found an old crowbar and wedged it into the frame, forcing it open. They spilled out into the daylight, gasping. Whisper shot past them, darting into the woods. They followed her without question. She led them straight back to the well, but this time, Sophie walked to its edge, placed her hand on the stone, and whispered something Emily couldn't hear. And the air changed. The temperature dropped. The wind died. And from the bottom of the well came a single, soft cry. Thank you. As the last light of the day faded, Emily noticed the forest around them shift. Colors sharpened. Sounds returned. Birds, leaves rustling, distant insects. It was as if the woods were waking up from a long nightmare. Whisper circled the well one last time, then jumped into Emily's arms. Mark knelt beside Sophie. Did she say anything else? Sophie nodded. She says the bad man's gone now. Emily wasn't sure she believed it, but something in the air, something felt different. Lighter. Free. She looked at the camera she'd carried the whole time, but the memory card was empty, as if the forest had never allowed itself to be seen. Back home, things were quieter. Sophie stopped sleepwalking. The knocking stopped. Whisper no longer cried at the window. Instead, she slept peacefully at Sophie's feet every night. Emily kept Anna's letters locked in a chest, unsure if she'd ever show anyone. Some truths, she believed, weren't meant to be told by voice or video, but she planted a tree behind the house just beyond the garden. At its base, she buried the final letter and the broken bracelet. A week later, Sophie drew a new picture. Girl in white, standing in a sunlit forest, holding hands with a cat, and above her head, a rainbow. Is that the sad girl? Emily asked. Sophie smiled. Not anymore. Weeks had passed since that final night at Camp Hollow Ridge. The nightmares had faded. Sophie was sleeping soundly. Whisper had settled into a routine, perched on the windowsill each morning, sunbathing in the garden by noon, curled beside Sophie by bedtime. But then, one quiet Thursday morning, she disappeared. Emily had just poured her coffee when she noticed Whisper wasn't waiting at the kitchen door like usual. She checked the window, the couch, the bedroom, and the yard. Nothing. Panic rose in her chest. She's never wandered far before, Mark said, trying to calm her. Maybe she chased a bird or something. Emily didn't buy it. Whisper never chased anything. She was focused, purposeful. Something was wrong. Sophie tugged on Emily's sleeve. She left us a picture. Emily followed her daughter to the living room, where a folded piece of drawing paper sat on the coffee table. Sophie's latest crayon masterpiece, a winding trail through a dark forest, a cat walking ahead, a girl following behind. She says I have to come again. They searched for hours, down the road, by the stream, even in the woods behind their home. But there was no sign of Whisper. Emily was about to give up when Sophie ran to the edge of the garden and pointed to the tree they had planted over the bracelet. There, she cried. The dirt had been disturbed. The soft mound now bore tiny paw prints and, curiously, something metallic poking from the soil. Emily dug gently and pulled out an old compass. It was brass, etched with vines, its glass cracked, but still functional. And beneath it, a strip of paper. The paper was brittle and yellowed, the handwriting faded but unmistakable. Anna's again. Follow the cat. North, past the twin stones. The path only opens for those who remember. Emily felt the weight of the compass in her palm. The needle quivered slightly, then locked in place, pointing toward the thickest part of the woods. Mark shook his head. We said we were done with this. But Emily stared at the compass. Sophie still talks to her in dreams. And Whisper, she's leading us again. She met his eyes. You don't have to come, but I have to follow. By noon, Emily and Sophie were packed and ready. Mark kissed them both goodbye, clearly conflicted but trusting Emily's instinct. They walked into the woods behind their house, guided by the compass. It wasn't long before they found it. 2 massive stones, side by side, covered in lichen. Sophie called them the sleeping giants. Between them, a faint trail emerged, a path they had never seen before, though they'd passed this way dozens of times. The forest beyond was thicker than they remembered, yet strangely quiet. Sophie walked with steady steps, no fear in her face. She says it's different now. The dark is gone. Emily nodded, following close behind. Every few minutes, she checked the compass. It continued to point forward, unwavering. Hours passed, and then they saw it. A weathered gate of iron and wood, hanging open, marking the entrance to a clearing that seemed untouched by time. And in the center, a small stone cottage covered in ivy. The cottage looked like something from a fairy tale, arched windows, a mossy roof, and roses winding up the sides like guardian vines. Whisper sat on the front step, calmly grooming her paw. She looked up as they approached, blinked once, and stood. Sophie ran to her and hugged her tightly. I knew you'd come back, she whispered. Emily examined the door. It was unlocked. Inside, dust covered everything, but the place had clearly once been lived in. Worn furniture, a faded rug, pictures on the walls, most too discolored to make out. An old phonograph in the corner. On the table was a leather-bound journal with a pressed flower tucked between the pages. The name on the cover made Emily's heart skip. Anna Whitmore. Emily opened the journal carefully. It began as a childhood diary, filled with innocent stories of summer adventures and dreams of becoming a teacher. But as the pages turned, the tone darkened. Emily Parker talks in her sleep now. She says she sees a man in the woods. We told the counselor, but he said we were imagining things. Whisper came again last night. I don't know how, but she always finds me. She's not just a cat. She's more than that. She sees things others don't. One passage stood out, dated the day after Emily Parker vanished. I saw him take her. I know I did, but I was too scared to tell. Whisper stayed with me the whole night. I think she was trying to show me the path back, but I wasn't brave enough to follow. Emily closed the journal, her hands trembling. Whisper wasn't just a lost cat. She was the guide. That night they stayed in the cottage. Whisper never left Sophie's side. By the firelight, Emily read more entries from Anna's journal. The final pages were strange, part poem, part prophecy. When the window knocks and the stars turn pale, the voice of the silent will tell the tale. Follow the path the forgotten tread to wake the sleeping and raise the dead. Sophie was already asleep when Emily heard it. A soft scratching at the back door. She rose slowly, flashlight in hand, and opened it. Nothing was there, except an old trail, one that wasn't there before, lit by faint blue lights like fireflies. Snaking into the trees, Whisper stood behind her, tail up. Sophie stirred from the bed. It's time, she said. They followed the trail through the woods until they reached a small grove encircled by ancient trees. Each tree bore a wooden plaque, names carved in careful letters. Amelia Hart, 1938, Rachel Silvers, 1951, Isaac Bell, 1974, Emily Parker, 1995. A silent cemetery. These are the forgotten, Emily whispered. Sophie nodded. They were all lost. But she helped them. A sudden gust of wind blew through the grove, and with it came a soft, whispering chorus, as if the trees themselves were exhaling. Leaves danced in the air, swirling around the mother, daughter, and Cat Sophie pointed to the base of one tree where a faint glow pulsed. There, buried just beneath the soil, Emily uncovered a wooden box. Inside, a silver key, a locket with a girl's portrait, and a scrap of paper with one word: sanctuary. The key fit a lock in the floor of the cottage, beneath a trap door hidden under the rug. Emily hesitated, then opened it. A narrow staircase led downward, lit by lanterns that flickered to life as they descended. At the bottom, a stone chamber. Shelves lined with books, old journals, names and dates. Candle stubs. Drawings. Whisper jumped to a pedestal in the center of the room and sat. Emily realized what this place was: a record of every child lost in the woods, every soul Whisper had tried to save. Anna had created it, the sanctuary, a haven of memory. It had been waiting for someone to find it, someone brave enough to follow the knocking. On the far wall was a large wooden panel. Emily cleared away dust and grime to reveal a mural, a girl holding a lantern, a cat beside her, a trail of stars behind them and carved into the base. Not all guides wear capes. Some wear whiskers. There was one last journal entry, newer than the rest, as if written for Emily. If you've come this far, you are the last light for the lost. Keep the path open. Let their names be spoken again. Whisper will show the way as she always has. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. The knocking hadn't been a cry for help. It had been an invitation. When they emerged from the sanctuary, the forest was alive. Birdsong filled the air. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Sophie smiled as she held Whisper close. She says it's safe now, but we have to help more. Back home, Emily began writing again. Not fiction, not ghost stories, but truth. She published the journals, the letters, the drawings. She spoke at schools, libraries, online forums, and every so often, another story would emerge. A child who spoke of a cat who visited them at night. A lost memory rekindled. A name remembered. Whisper would be gone for days at a time, always returning, always quiet. Her job wasn't done. But now, neither was Emily's. The days after returning from the hidden cottage were strangely quiet. Too quiet. Whisper was home again, spending long hours sitting near the bookshelf where Emily had placed Anna's journal. She seemed contemplative, as if waiting for something, or someone. Emily busied herself transcribing Anna's writings, trying to honor the stories of the children whose names had been carved into the grove. But something about the photo on the wall of the cottage, now framed and hanging in their hallway, kept bothering her. A sepia-toned group portrait of children at a summer camp, all in uniforms, standing in front of a cabin. Anna stood off to the right. In the center, arms wrapped around two younger girls, stood a taller child. Blonde hair, big smile, name scribbled in pencil on the back. Claire. That name hadn't appeared in any journal entries. Emily asked Sophie one afternoon, "Do you recognize the girl in the middle?" Sophie nodded slowly. "She's the one that doesn't speak. She hides in the trees." Emily blinked. "What?" "In my dreams," Sophie said. "She's the only one who doesn't say anything." That night, Emily had trouble sleeping. Sophie was peaceful, curled beside Whisper. But Emily kept hearing the name Claire in her mind like an echo. At 3:27 a.m., the sound came again. Knock, knock. This time, not at the front window. It came from the mirror in the hallway. Emily approached cautiously. In the dim light, the reflection shimmered unnaturally. As she drew closer, frost began to crawl up the glass from the bottom corners. She gasped. Inside the mirror, faint and flickering like a candle flame, was the outline of a girl, blonde, wearing a camp shirt, staring out with haunted, hollow eyes, and behind her, trees! Emily stumbled back. Whisper was there in seconds, leaping to the hallway and meowing furiously. Sophie appeared behind her mother, rubbing her eyes. "She's stuck." "Who is?" "Claire. She's the one no one looked for. She's waiting." Emily didn't know what to do. This was different. The mirror wasn't just a metaphor. It was a threshold. Mark, now fully invested in their journey, helped her move the mirror off the wall and bring it into the study. They placed it under the brightest light they had and tried everything: photographs, heat, even knocking back. Nothing changed, until Sophie did something no one expected. She walked up to the mirror, placed both hands on the glass, and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." The frost paused, then cleared slightly. The girl in the mirror blinked, then reached out and touched the same spot Sophie had touched. A spark flashed across the surface, electric and sharp. The reflection rippled, and for a brief second, Emily saw something behind Claire's image. A long hallway, wooden walls, flickering light. A room number 3. She grabbed her notebook and wrote it down. Sophie spoke again. "She's at Camp Hollow Ridge, in the old basement, but no one knows it's still there." Mark pulled out the old camp brochure Emily had found in Anna's journal. They scoured it. There was no mention of a basement, just a storm shelter near the dining hall. "I checked this place when we were there," Mark muttered. "There's nothing below ground anymore." But Emily noticed something strange. In the corner of the map, in faded ink, was a red X, not labeled, just marked. She held it up to the light. Behind the X, faint impressions, lines, measurements, initials. She flipped the map over and realized the ink had bled through from the other side. Someone had drawn a second map in invisible ink. They heated it gently over the stove, and it appeared. A hidden sublevel beneath the original cabins. marked maintenance B1 to B4, and next to B3, the name Claire scratched in with a child's handwriting. Emily exhaled. She's still there. They left at dawn, this time with a clearer purpose. Not to face ghosts, but to save someone long forgotten. Camp Hollow Ridge looked more decayed than before. The vines had grown thicker, the paths even more overgrown. But the map led them straight to a spot behind the mess hall where ivy choked the remains of a cement stairwell. Mark cleared it carefully, pulling vines and debris until they found a rusted hatch. It groaned as it opened, sending a rush of musty, cold air up into their faces. Sophie held Whisper close, whispering something Emily couldn't hear, and then they descended. Beneath the earth, the temperature dropped sharply. Their flashlights barely penetrated the darkness. They passed a row of heavy doors, B1, B2, until they reached it. 3. The door had no handle, only the faintest echo of scratching on the inside, and carved into the wood with something sharp. Please! Emily's fingers trembled as she reached for the lock. It wouldn't turn. But Sophie, with Whisper still cradled in her arms, stepped forward and pressed the locket from the grove against the lock. There was a soft click. The door creaked open. Inside, they found a small room, a mattress, broken toys, torn curtains over a vent, faded chalk drawings on the floor, and in the center of the room, a small skeleton wrapped in a child's blanket. Undisturbed, preserved by time, Emily dropped to her knees. Oh, Claire. On the floor beside the blanket was a cracked mirror, its surface dark and empty now. Mark turned away, blinking back tears. Sophie knelt quietly, placing Whisper beside the blanket. Whisper meowed once, then again. The air shifted, and in the mirror, the faint glow returned. Claire's face, serene and at peace, nodded once, and disappeared. They buried Claire beneath the grove of names. For the first time, Emily carved one herself, Claire Addison, 1995. She placed a photograph next to it, the one from the wall, a name returned to the world, a memory made whole. That night, as they camped in the clearing, Sophie told Emily, "She's not lost anymore." Whisper lay beside them, purring softly. "She says thank you." Emily hugged her daughter, tears trailing silently. "She saved me too, didn't she?" Sophie nodded. "She saves everyone." Back home, they added Claire's story to the growing archive. The journal now held not just Anna's voice, but many. Whispers from the lost, from those who had wandered too far or fallen between the cracks of the world. Emily's blog exploded with readers, survivors, parents, children who dreamed of a cat knocking on a window. Whisper watched it all silently, and then one night, just before dawn, she left again, out the window, down the path, into the trees. Sophie stood at the window and smiled. She has another one to find. And Emily realized something beautiful. This wasn't a haunting. It was a mission. Whisper wasn't a ghost. She was hope, in fur and whiskers. The house had grown still without her. 3 nights had passed since Whisper disappeared into the woods. Again, leaving Emily and Sophie with the memory of Claire's rescue and the soft trail of paw prints that faded into the forest beyond their home. Sophie missed her most. She left the window cracked open each night, sat by it in the morning, whispered good night into the wind at dusk. Emily tried to stay grounded. She threw herself into the stories left behind in Anna's journal, digitizing them, cross-referencing names with historical archives and lost persons, registries. There were now dozens of posts on her blog, each one more haunting than the last. The blog had gone viral. Emails poured in. Comments overflowed. One particular message stopped her cold. "There's a mark on our door. Just like the one from your story, we thought it was a coincidence, until our son said a white cat came to his window and told him a girl needed help." Emily stared at the email, hands trembling. Sophie walked in moments later. "She's back," she said quietly. Emily blinked. "Who?" Sophie simply pointed to the window. There, silhouetted against the orange dawn light, sat Whisper, mud on her paws, eyes glowing, and etched in the frost of the glass. Was a symbol, a circle with an X through it, the same one from the map. Whisper didn't come in right away. She stayed perched outside the window, staring directly at Emily. A soft sound accompanied her return, not a meow this time, but a humming. Like air moving through a hollow pipe, almost a melody. Emily opened the window, and Whisper leapt gracefully inside. She was thinner than before. A nick on her ear. Her fur matted and streaked with twigs, but her eyes remained the same, knowing. Sophie embraced her instantly, burying her face into the soft fur, whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Then came the knock. From the front door. Mark opened it. No one was there. But on the wooden frame near the bottom corner was the symbol again. Circle. X. A faint arrow drawn below it pointing right. They stepped outside. On the driveway was a line of muddy paw prints leading away from the house. And a small envelope, inside, a photograph of a man and a child, with one word written on the back, "Help." The email had come from a woman named Dana Cray. She and her husband, Eric, had moved to a crumbling lighthouse on the cliffs of Crescent Bay 2 years ago to get away from city life after the disappearance of their daughter, Melody. Emily and Mark packed that evening. Sophie insisted on going. Whisper didn't wait for permission. She simply jumped into the car and curled into the back seat like she knew exactly where they were going. Crescent Bay was 3 hours away, and the drive passed in near silence. At the top of a winding cliffside road stood the lighthouse, a once grand tower now weathered by wind and salt, its paint peeling, its glass cracked. Dana stood waiting outside with a flashlight. She looked exhausted. "This way," she said, without even introducing herself. Inside, she explained it all. 3 weeks ago, their remaining son, Caleb, just 6 years old, began speaking of a girl he could see outside his window at night. "She sings to me," he told them. "She's scared. She said the cat will come first." Then the mark appeared, on the door. And then, the knocking. Emily sat with Caleb that night, her recorder in hand. He didn't seem afraid. In fact, he smiled when he saw Whisper. "That's her cat," he said. "The one that follows the girl who's lost." Emily gently asked about the girl. "She fell down," Caleb whispered, "and no one could find her. So she waited. And now she's stuck." "Stuck where?" Emily asked softly. "In the water," he said. "Down under. In the rock." Dana was in tears in the other room. Emily pieced together what little information they had. Melody had vanished during a family hike 2 years ago along the cliffs. It was assumed she had fallen and been swept away by the tide. No body was ever recovered. But Caleb's dreams, and now Whisper's return, told another story. "She says there's a door in the cave," Caleb whispered as he drifted to sleep. "And you have to knock 3 times to open it." Emily looked down at Whisper. She was already staring at the lighthouse's old cliffside path. By morning, Emily, Mark, Sophie, and Dana stood at the base of the cliffs. The tide was out, revealing a narrow passage between jagged rock formations. Whisper led the way, tail held high. They reached a narrow cave opening hidden behind a curtain of seaweed and barnacle-covered stone. Inside, the walls were damp and slick. The air was filled with salt and silence. They reached a flat stone wall, featureless, cold, until Whisper meowed, then pawed at the base. Sophie approached first and tapped the stone, once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Then Mark leaned in and pushed. The wall shifted with a grinding sound. A narrow passage opened behind it. They entered single file. At the end of the corridor was a pool of still water, and carved above it, faint but unmistakable, Melody 2019. Dana collapsed to her knees. They waited in silence, hoping for a sign. None came. The cave air grew heavier. The water rippled slightly, and then just beneath the surface a small glowing orb appeared, not a light, a reflection. Melody. Her face shimmered in the water, her eyes meeting Dana's. She wasn't a ghost, not like Claire had been. She was somewhere, between. Caleb had called it under. Emily realized it now. Melody hadn't drowned. She had slipped through, into whatever space held the children Anna had written about. The place where time stopped and memory echoed. Sophie stepped forward. She wants to come home, Whisper meowed, soft and long. A hum answered from the cave's walls, a vibration. Then, from the shadows, a small hand broke the surface of the pool, reaching. Dana didn't hesitate. She stepped into the water up to her waist and held out her arms. Melody rose slowly from the depths, wet breathing, alive. She collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. "I got lost. I know," Dana cried. "But you're safe now." Back at the lighthouse, Melody was wrapped in blankets, her skin cold but color returning. Paramedics arrived, stunned to find the girl they had presumed dead years ago. She was under observation for days, but the doctors were baffled. No signs of trauma. No malnutrition. "She should be dead," one said quietly. "But she's not." Whisper stayed beside her the whole time. Caleb beamed when he saw his sister again. "She said you found her," he told Whisper. "Just like the others." Emily and Mark stayed to help them settle. The media would come soon, but for now it was peace. Melody spoke very little, but one thing she said to Sophie stuck with her forever. They don't forget. They just get too quiet. On the drive home, Emily sat with her laptop. Her blog now had thousands of comments. New ones appeared every hour. Photos, symbols, sightings of the white cat, children drawing strange marks in their notebooks. A pattern was forming, and it was growing. Back home, Whisper stood at the window again. Her fur was clean, her eyes bright. Sophie held her close and whispered, "Where to next?" And Whisper purred. The rain returned with fury that night. It slammed against the windows in thick, hammering sheets. Lightning forked across the sky, and thunder rolled in like distant drums. Emily watched from the window. Wrapped in a blanket, Whisper nestled on her lap. They had barely unpacked from Crescent Bay. Melody's rescue was still a fresh wound, raw and miraculous. But neither Emily nor Mark had been able to sleep since returning. Sophie had woken up, screaming the last 2 nights. "It's her," she whispered, pale and trembling. "The girl with the red mittens." Emily had assumed it was just a dream, leftover fear from everything they'd seen. But tonight, something felt different, heavier, electric. At exactly 3:14 a.m., Whisper sat up straight on Emily's lap, then leapt down. She padded to the front door and scratched. Not the window this time. The door. Emily followed, heart pounding. When she opened it, a blast of wind nearly knocked her backward. There, on the porch step, soaked in rain, was a single red mitten, small, child-sized, freshly dropped. Whisper sat beside it, looking up, waiting. The mitten had initials stitched into the cuff, R.A. Emily's first thought was to check the archives from Anna's journal. There were dozens of entries they still hadn't fully translated, scribbles and margins, pieces of stories. She dug through them now in the early morning light, her fingers shaking slightly as she scanned the list. And there it was. Entry 47. R.A. The girl who disappeared during recess. The date, October 1996. The location, Dunbridge Elementary. Sophie leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. That's only a few towns away. Mark rubbed his eyes, joining them. And she was last seen with a red mitten? Emily nodded. She dropped one during a game of tag. Teachers turned their heads for a second and she was gone. They looked at Whisper. She stood by the door again. This time her fur bristling, tail stiff. The storm still raged outside, but there was no doubt now. Whisper had brought them another message. They arrived just after noon. Dunbridge Elementary had been closed for years, shut down due to budget cuts and mold concerns. It now sat behind a locked gate, rusted and sagging. The playground beyond was half swallowed by weeds. Emily, Mark, and Sophie climbed over the gate. Whisper slinked through a hole in the fence with ease. The building creaked like an old ship. Water dripped from the ceilings. The tiled floors were cracked and speckled with grime. They followed Whisper down the hallway, her path purposeful, as though she remembered every inch of this place. She stopped outside a room labeled Room 3B, Kindergarten. Inside, the remnants of a tiny classroom lay scattered. Overturned chairs, faded posters, and the faint smell of chalk and mildew. Whisper sat by a cubby near the back, scratched into the wood, almost invisible now. Rena A. 1996 then, they heard it, a soft tapping from beneath the floor. 3 knocks. The basement wasn't listed on any blueprint. Mark found the access door behind a janitor's closet. Half buried under fallen shelves, they pried it open. A ladder descended into complete darkness. Sophie hesitated, but Whisper jumped down without fear. Emily followed next, flashlight trembling in her hands. The basement was a maze of old pipes, leaking radiators, and forgotten storage. But in the center, something stood out, a child's desk, untouched by time, and beside it, on the cold stone floor, another red mitten. A faint humming echoed around them, like a lullaby. Emily turned in a slow circle, trying to pinpoint the sound. That's when she saw her. A figure in the corner. Small. Pale. Wearing one red mitten. She stepped out slowly, eyes wide and blinking as though seeing daylight for the first time in years. Her hair was tangled and her shoes mismatched. She clutched a worn notebook to her chest. Emily knelt down. "Rena?" she whispered. The girl nodded once, then looked at Whisper and smiled. "She found me," Rena said. "I was stuck in the echo." "What's the echo?" Mark asked gently. Rena looked around. "It's where the sounds go when no one listens." I waited. I tried knocking. She held up her tiny fist and rapped 3 times on the desk, the same rhythm, then added, "But someone else is in there now." Emily's blood ran cold. "Who?" Rena opened her notebook, drew a small stick figure. Then added eyes. Lots of eyes. Too many. They took Rena home that night. The doctors were called again, confused, shocked. She was dehydrated but otherwise fine, still 5 years old, still stuck in time. But Emily couldn't focus on the miracle. All she could think about was the figure in the notebook, the one with the eyes, the echo. It wasn't just a void or a limbo. It had something inside it. Mark tried to dismiss it as a child's imagination. Sophie disagreed. She said it watches when no one listens. What if that's what traps the others? What if it's been feeding on forgotten kids? Emily didn't sleep that night. Neither did Whisper. She stood guard at the foot of the bed, tail twitching, ears rotating to every creak and shadow. Emily returned to Anna's journal at dawn. There was one section they had barely touched, smudged and fragile, water-damaged and torn. She scanned it carefully. The heading, "The Whisperer Comes Before the Dark." Below it, a list of names, Claire, Melody, Rena, and beneath them, Unknown. Name forgotten. Last seen in reflection. There was a drawing, faded and childlike, a girl staring into a mirror. Behind her, a mass of eyes and limbs. It had no face, only watching, waiting. Emily's breath caught. Whisper leapt onto the table beside her and pawed at the page, then looked up. The message was clear. The next child wouldn't just be lost, she would be taken. That night, Sophie stood brushing her teeth, the mirror fogged with steam from the bath. As she wiped it clean, she froze. There, just behind her reflection, a single eye, large, black, watching. She screamed. Emily and Mark burst in, but the mirror was normal again. Whisper stood on the counter, staring into it. And then she knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. A hairline crack split down the center of the glass, and a voice whispered, "She's almost here." The crack in the bathroom mirror had grown. Overnight, it splintered like a spider web, thin fractures racing across the glass like veins. But it wasn't just the mirror in Sophie's bathroom. It was every mirror in the house. Emily stared at her reflection in the hallway, horrified. Every surface, every reflective pane held some kind of distortion. A bend in the background. A flicker just out of frame. A darkness that didn't belong. Whisper refused to enter rooms with mirrors now. She crouched low, tail lashing, eyes wide, letting out long, low growls. Sophie's voice was quiet that morning. "I don't think it wants to take me," she said. Emily turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Sophie looked toward the hallway. "I think it wants her." She pointed to Whisper. Mark set up motion detectors around the house. They weren't taking chances anymore. Whisper remained on edge, her ears twitching constantly. Every time a breeze brushed past a window or the floorboards creaked, she darted toward the sound with her fur standing on end. That night, the walls talked, softly at first, then louder. Emily, wide awake, followed the whispers down the stairs. They weren't coming from a person. They were coming from the mirrors. She pressed her ear to the bathroom door and heard it clearly. "Come see. Come see. She knows the way. The cat remembers." Emily backed away. Mark joined her moments later, holding one of Anna's final journals. "It's written here," he said, breathless. Anna believed Whisper wasn't just a messenger. She was the key. Emily frowned. Key to what? To the place behind the glass. She said Whisper knew the door. They devised a plan. If Whisper was the key, then perhaps she could show them how to open it safely, or how to close it for good. They cleared the living room, draped every mirror with sheets. Only one was left exposed, an antique vanity mirror Anna once used in her studio. They placed it in the center of the room. At 3 a.m., the usual hour of strange events, Whisper approached the mirror. She stared into it, unblinking, then lifted her paw and knocked 3 times. The glass rippled as though it were water disturbed by wind. A shape moved behind it, thin, humanoid, but wrong. Its proportions didn't make sense. It reached forward, placing one long hand against the other side of the mirror, then slowly traced words into the condensation building along the inside of the glass. She took them all. Then, she is still hungry. They consulted Anna's deepest journals, the ones filled with symbols and old folklore. In a margin beside one faded page, they found it. The Keeper of Forgotten Things. A being that existed outside time, beyond memory. It fed on abandonment, children no one came looking for, stories no one finished telling, echoes never answered. Whisper, Anna had believed, had once been part of that world, but she left. Broke, free. And since then, she had been hunted. Emily pieced it together slowly. Whisper wasn't just warning them. She wasn't just helping them find the lost. She was being pursued. The keeper wanted her back, and it would take anyone in its way. Sophie had always drawn quietly in the background, but that morning, her sketchbook revealed something chilling. Dozens of drawings of the same creature, tall, eyeless, with tendrils reaching like vines and mouths where they didn't belong. In every drawing, Whisper stood in front of it, between the creature and Sophie. Some drawings were of the hallway mirror, others of the porch. One was especially different. It showed the basement, a cracked mirror, Whisper sitting before it, and above them both, a word written in jagged script. Trade, Emily's. Voice trembled. She wants a trade. Mark nodded slowly. She wants Whisper, in exchange for leaving the others alone. That night, Emily sat with Whisper on the porch. The air was still, too still. The mirrors in the house had gone black, their surfaces no longer reflecting light. Instead, they showed places, twisting tunnels, endless staircases, and rooms filled with old toys, shoes, broken clocks. All items once cherished, all now forgotten. The keeper had created a kingdom of castaways, and she wanted Whisper to return to it. At 3:14 a.m., the mirror on the porch window shimmered. A hand emerged, ghostly and translucent, its nails tapping against the glass. Emily stood. No, she held up Anna's journal, now marked with symbols meant to protect. You don't get to take her. But the keeper did not speak. She only waited. And then, Whisper stepped forward, tail high, eyes clear, and touched the mirror. The mirror swallowed her like liquid silver. Sophie screamed. Emily tried to grab her, but it was too late. Whisper was gone. The mirror returned to normal. Their house fell into silence. The wind stopped. The whispers ended. Every mirror became just a mirror again. But the silence wasn't relief. It was dread. Mark checked the basement. No sign of anything, no knock, no shadow, no sound. Emily sat on the porch, holding the red mitten Whisper had carried home. A single word etched into the wood beneath the porch window, barely visible. Wait. That night, Sophie dreamed. In her dream, she stood in a hallway lined with mirrors, tall, ornate, cracked. Each one showed a different scene. In one, Melody ran through a garden. In another, Claire sat beside a tree, feeding birds. And in the last one, Whisper sat in front of a dark throne, defiant and unblinking. The keeper loomed above her, but she was no longer afraid. In the dream, Whisper turned to Sophie and nodded once, then tapped the floor with her paw. 3 times. When Sophie woke up, she ran to her sketchbook and drew a door, a mirror-shaped door, framed with red mittens. She pressed her hand to the page. From the walls, softly, knock, knock, knock. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It had been 5 nights since Whisper vanished into the mirror, 5 nights since Sophie dreamed of her surrounded by forgotten souls, trapped in that gray, echoing realm the keeper called home. Mark no longer set alarms or motion detectors. There was no point. Nothing stirred. The porch window remained still, its surface no longer hosting nightly knocks or flickers of presence. But Sophie, she hadn't given up. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., she sat by the front window, sketchbook, in her lap, flashlight off, waiting, and on the 6th night, it happened. A soft, familiar sound. Knock, knock, knock. She shot up. There was no one outside. The porch light flickered, then held steady. But Sophie didn't look out the window. She looked at the glass itself. And there, just behind the fog of her breath on the pane, 3. Faint scratch marks glided downward, like claws. Emily and Mark joined Sophie in the living room. The mirror they had left uncovered was now shimmering again, only subtly but unmistakably. Anna's journal had referenced an event called the reversal, a moment when the mirror's function could be flipped, not to reflect reality, but to become a gateway. And it was Whisper who could guide someone through, but only if the person following had been marked. Emily opened Sophie's sketchbook. There, etched beneath the latest drawing, a new word written in her own neat, childlike handwriting. Come. They took no chances. Mark set up 3 mirrors in a triangle formation, each anointed with Anna's protective glyphs. Sophie stood inside the center, holding the red mitten Whisper had once brought home. The porch mirror rippled once more, and then a streak of white fur. Whisper was back, or at least part of her. Whisper's face looked unchanged, but her fur had grown patchy in places. Her eyes held an unnatural glimmer, like moonlight on black water. She stepped forward, but didn't pass all the way through the mirror. Only her front half emerged. The rest remained tethered, her tail vanishing into shimmering glass like smoke dissolving into air. Sophie reached toward her, and the moment her fingers brushed Whisper's fur, the room darkened. Suddenly, all mirrors around them turned silver. They began showing the other side, the kingdom of forgotten things. Sophie gasped. There was Melody, sitting beneath a gray tree with paper leaves, and Claire, walking along a stream filled with clock parts, and behind them all, that towering, silent shape, the Keeper. But this time it looked at Sophie, not Emily, not Mark, her. Whisper stepped back, then forward again, pawing at the mirror. She wasn't trying to return alone. She was trying to bring Sophie. Through, Mark panicked. No, absolutely not. But Sophie remained calm. She's not taking me, she whispered. She's asking for help. The mirror shimmered again. Anna's journal flipped pages on its own, as if caught in a breeze. It stopped at a page marked, in red ink. The child touched by memory can walk both roads. Emily froze. Anna always believed you were meant to finish her work, she said. Maybe. This is how. Sophie reached toward the mirror again. This time it swallowed her whole. Inside the mirror, the world was gray. Color existed only in patches, like old photographs slowly fading. Sophie stood on a path made of old books and dusty toys. Whisper walked ahead, never glancing back. All around her were objects she didn't recognize. Broken violins, cracked snow globes, shoelaces tied together in bows, the kingdom of forgotten things. It wasn't just sad, it was terrifying. Voices whispered from inside boxes. Tiny hands reached from behind door frames, and everywhere, eyes, hundreds. Watching. She passed Melody, who looked at her with glassy eyes. Do you remember me? Sophie whispered. Melody tilted her head. You forgot my voice, she said softly. But Whisper didn't, Sophie cried. But only for a second. Because the ground began to shake, and the Keeper stepped into view. It towered above her, a giant stitched together from shadows and loneliness. Sophie stood tall, holding the mitten to her chest. I remember now, she said. I remember Melody, and Claire, and all of them. The Keeper didn't speak. But the world around her shifted. Melody faded, Claire dissolved. The kingdom crumbled into wind-blown ash. Sophie dropped the mitten. Whisper leapt in front of her, and for the first time the Keeper spoke, not aloud, but inside Sophie's mind. She does not belong to you. Sophie stood her ground. No, she said, but neither do they belong to you. They were abandoned. They were forgotten. That is all I need. Sophie raised the sketchbook, now glowing with light. No, she said. They were loved. The light spread from the sketchbook to the world around her. Trees burst into bloom, toys restored themselves, voices returned, and Melody and Claire smiled. Sophie held out her hand. "Come with me." They touched her fingers. The kingdom cracked like porcelain. The keeper screamed, but only once. And then Whisper meowed softly and touched the path. Suddenly, they were home. Mark and Emily held each other as the mirror cracked down the middle. Sophie lay unconscious on the floor, but next to her, Melody and Claire, alive, breathing, real. Whisper, slightly thinner, curled up beside them. When Sophie woke, she smiled. "I remembered them," she said simply. Emily cried and wrapped her daughter in her arms. The porch window never knocked again, and the mirrors, one by one, stopped showing anything but reflections. Whisper stayed. Every night she slept near Sophie's bed, eyes always on the door, as if watching, guarding. Because there are some realms you never truly escape, but as long as you remember, they can't take you back. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, scattering dust motes across the living room where Sophie lay peacefully. Mark and Emily sat nearby, holding her hands, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Whisper curled up at Sophie's feet, purring softly. No longer a fragile stray, but a guardian and a friend. The air in the house felt lighter, as though the shadows that had clung to every corner were finally lifting. For the first time in weeks, peace reigned. Days passed, and with each one Sophie grew stronger, her sketchbook filled with drawings, not just of forgotten children and haunted mirrors, but of hope, friendship, and bravery. Melody and Claire stayed close, their presence a reminder that memories never truly fade. Whisper never left Sophie's side, her eyes always watchful, always vigilant. Emily and Mark began repairs on the house, replacing cracked mirrors, mending broken glass, and hanging new curtains. The home slowly returned to its warm, welcoming self. One evening, Sophie gathered her family and held Anna's journal open on the kitchen table. "I want to share what we learned," she said softly. They read together about the keeper, the forgotten realm, and the power of memory. Anna's words echoed, "Love is the strongest light. It burns away darkness and holds the lost close." Emily smiled. "We must never forget, even the things that seem broken or lost." Mark nodded. "This house is more than walls and mirrors. It's a sanctuary for memory and hope." Whisper's nightly visits to the window ceased, but her role remained unchanged. She patrolled the house like a silent sentinel, alert to the smallest sound. At times she would pause before a mirror, staring long and hard, as if ensuring no shadow could slip through. Her bond with Sophie deepened, and the once fearful stray became a symbol of resilience. One night, Sophie sat by the porch window with Whisper in her lap. Outside, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if celebrating their victory over the darkness. Sophie whispered to Whisper, "Thank you for coming to me every night, for knocking on that window and for bringing us back." Whisper blinked slowly and nudged Sophie's hand. In that quiet moment, Sophie made a promise. To always remember, to never let the forgotten fade away. The house became a place of gathering. Neighbors, friends, and family came by, drawn by the stories of courage, loss, and love. Sophie shared her sketches and journals, teaching others about the power of memory and hope. The mirrors, once feared, were now symbols of connection, portals to stories waiting to be told. Late one night, Emily awoke to a soft glow emanating from the hallway mirror. She approached cautiously. In the glass, she saw a fleeting figure, not menacing but serene. The keeper, bathed in light, smiled gently. Then, with a whisper carried on the wind, the figure faded away. Emily knew it was a farewell, a sign that the keeper was no longer a threat, but a guardian watching from afar. As the final minutes unfolded, Sophie and Whisper sat by the window once more. The night was calm, the stars twinkling like promises in the dark. Sophie looked at Whisper and smiled. "You came to me every night," she said softly, "and now we're together. Forever." Whisper purred. The window remained still, reflecting not just their faces, but the light of memories saved and love that would never be forgotten. The end.